Let's discuss this then. I'm joined by political and social analyst Tessa Duans. Tessa, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for being with us. So the President today in his weekly newsletter making it clear that the decision on the cigarette ban is one that was taken collectively by the National Command Council. Why then are some people still so married to the idea that Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was solely to blame for that decision?
So we must remember that history is not very short. It's quite long in this country, and people are acutely aware that not so long ago we were talking about the ANC factions, and we were talking about the minister as a rival, a potential rival of the president's within the ANC, and of course that being linked to many narratives around the former President Jacob Zuma. So it's not unusual that people would make these links between what's happening right now and the politics of the country in the recent past. But I think what people are failing to do is recognize the moment. I think what politicians have tried to do, and particularly in the ANC, we've seen how even Luthuli House has really taken their foot off the political accelerator in the last while and allowed the president and his cabinet a lot of space so that the politics doesn't get in the way of the work. And we've seen actually that when the politics is not getting in the way of the work, a lot of work gets done, even that hasn't been done for the last 26 years. And so I think people are married to the political battles and the factions that have existed and not looking at the moment right now where the president not only needs unity in his cabinet, which I think he is fighting very hard to make sure he has, but also needs the credibility and the trust of the public in himself, but also in his ministers. We must remember it's the president that has made the decision that the ministers will speak on his behalf in terms of the details. He could have done a Donald Trump and decided, or a Boris Johnson, and decided that he was going to do all of the talking and everything was going to come from him. But he clearly trusts this cabinet of his. And I think we should also look beyond the politics and start trusting them too.
And just on that point that you make about people going back as far as the pre-Nasrec days of the ANC, where both President Cyril Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma were wanting to be president of the ANC, it's been interesting, though, in the criticism of people who are saying that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma basically made this decision and forced it on her cabinet colleagues, which we know, as we've been saying, has now been dispelled by the president. But in that criticism, that also then for people who are claimed to be supporters of the president reflects badly on him, because if you do have a president who's able to be pushed into a corner by a minister when he is leader of the country, that then suggests a weakness of leadership from him.
Absolutely, and I think supporters of President Cyril Ramaphosa should be very careful about the narrative that they're pushing, because to claim that a president who was strong enough 2 or 3 weeks ago to reprimand a minister for going to lunch. Essentially, that's what he did when he reprimanded the Minister of Communications. For that president to now be seen in the light that he can just be steamrolled by one minister in his cabinet makes him look weak at a time that he is doing everything that he can to show very strong leadership, and leadership in a very, very prickly political environment already. And so I think it doesn't do the president any favors that even people who are in support of him would push a narrative that would make him seem like he's not at the helm and not in charge. I mean, there have been calls for the president to be more available for question and answer, and I think I particularly agree with that in the light of what's happened now, is that the more access we have to the president, being able to back up what he is saying and not only leave it up to the ministers who can then be attacked, the better for us, because I think we do need to know that the rationales driving this are supported by the president, they're pushed by the president, he's giving the direction. I mean, there were people who still don't know that the National Command Council is not chaired by Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, but is chaired by the President of the Republic. And this NCC is not, some sideshow. It is actually the main event of this coronavirus response. And so the blame shifting towards Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma particularly doesn't reflect well on the president from his supporter side.
You touched on this slightly, Tessa, but I'm wondering, in the long term, how does government get ahead of moments such as these? Because we don't know how long the lockdown is going to end. There's still no vaccine for COVID-19, so there will be decisions that are taken and possibly reversed. How do they get ahead of something like what we're seeing right now?
So I think there are two parts to that answer. I think the first thing that we've learned from this moment is that we don't have long-term planning strategies that are ready to absorb shocks to our system. And so our system is very fragile, and not just our economic system. I know there's been a lot of emphasis placed on the economy, but what we've seen, actually the biggest shocks that have not been able to be absorbed has been the shocks around poor service delivery and the shocks around social relief and things like poverty and hunger in our country. I've been saying to people, the people who are hungry right now in our country were not fine 6 weeks ago. They were on the brink of hunger then, and now we have been exposed, and we need to be able to deal with these shocks to the system better by delivering better to the future. But the second big thing that I think we all need to be cognizant of in this moment is that the president has said explicitly that the economy of our future and the South Africa of our future cannot be the one that we had 6 weeks ago before this crisis. Crises, and especially pandemics like this, have in history changed societies. And so I think we must be conscious about thinking about inequality particularly, and how do we use this moment to redress inequality, to think about work and the economy, to think about SMEs, but also to think just about the basic conditions of people's lives. If we can use this to have a government that is thinking about the society differently, that understands the communities that they are leading better, I think we will come out of this much better if we have a different lens to our society than the one we had 6 weeks ago.
Tessa, thank you so much for speaking to us. That was political and social analyst Tessa Durms.